Hi there, Dr. Bill Crawford here, psychologist, speaker, author of 7 books, host of 2 PBS specials. Here again to bring you another tip on how to help you create the life you want. Specifically, how to use my life from the top of the mind philosophy to bring more clarity, confidence, creativity to everything you do. Today I want to look at the subject of change, especially the difference between why and how in terms of how we make change. Because I think a lot of people really want to understand why they find themselves in a certain situation in the first place. So often they come to me as a psychologist, a speaker, a coach, and say, hey Bill, why am I doing this? What's going on? And I think that can be helpful as long as we put it in context. Because what we don't want to do is focus so specifically on some external cause that somehow we think the solution is external as well. Somehow we have to change something in our life. Now, it doesn't mean that sometimes things in our life don't need to be changed, but this whole idea of looking externally for both the cause and the solution can really trip us up when we're trying to have more influence in our life and in the lives of others. I like to focus more on the how. How do we make the changes we want? What are those changes? What are we trying to accomplish here? What are the qualities and characteristics we want to bring to life? And where can we make that change from an internal perspective? How can we change internally to then express that externally because we have more control, more influence over the internal versus the external? Now, for those of you who follow my life from the top of the mind philosophy, you know I like to really look at how the brain processes information and understand that in terms of both the why and the how. The reason we find ourselves feeling stressed, anxious, frustrated, overwhelmed, annoyed, for the most part, is because this limbic system, this middle part of the brain, this scanner, processor, router part of the brain is interpreting some person or situation in a way that's throwing us into the brainstem, throwing us into that reactive brain. That's not our fault. That's not how we're failing. That's not what's wrong with us, but it is what isn't working. And it does explain why different people react to different situations in different ways. Why sometimes people say things that don't make sense. Why sometimes we do things that don't make sense. We're coming from the part of the brain that doesn't make sense. So I'm a big fan of engaging that upper 80% of the brain, the neocortex, what I call the top of the mind. In order to do that, we have to actually shift up there. So that's one of the things I show people how to do, how to shift from the brainstem to the neocortex. Then we got to use this upper 80% of the brain, this kind of clear, confident, creative, compassionate part of who we are to now define who we are as we go through life. So the how, in my opinion, is really more important than the why. Now, there is one exception here, actually 2. One, if something really, really bad has happened in your life, you've lost a loved one or something meaningful has really, really happened, and that's kind of thrown you into a tizzy, that's understandable. That's something we can get over. It's really just called grieving and healing. Another why is, why are we making the change? If we're making the change out of fear of the fear, out of anger at somebody, out of some reluctance to feel all the bad things we're feeling, gosh, we're still being driven by that lower 20% of the brain. Fear, worry, depression, anxiety. We want to see that not as part of the solution in terms of a motivation to change, but what happens when we get thrown into that lower brain. We want to have a higher purpose in order to change. We want to have a meaning that has us wanting to change for a different reason. One of the questions I love to ask my clients and my seminar participants is, would you teach this to someone you love? Would you like to be more influential in your life and in the lives of others? If so, wouldn't the motivation to change be something about how much you love them, how much you love yourself, and how much you'd like to love life? What if love versus fear, awareness versus worry, were the energy for change, was the why for change? So what I would encourage you to do is kind of look at, okay, what are the changes you want to make? Are you stuck in looking at the why from the past, trying to figure out why you found yourself in this situation? Frankly, most of it is because our limbic system learned to interpret life that way, threw us down to the brainstem over and over. We created a habitual way of thinking and feeling around that. Okay, knowing that is enough, we can now move to the how. How do we change? we understand that this middle part of the brain needs to be reprogrammed, needs to be retrained to see life in a way that sends it up to the neocortex versus down to the brainstem. Easier said than done, of course, isn't everything. So if you want to learn how to do that, this is what I love to do. I help people do this. There's 4 ways we can do this. Number one, I've written a book called Life from the Top of the Mind. It's a manual for how to do this. I've got a 10-session audio series on my website, BillCrawfordPh.com. Shows you how to walks you through this and from an audio perspective. I've got a video series that breaks this process down into 20 modules. Gives you a short video into each one, a to-do at the end of each one. You can find all of that on my website. Plus, some people really like to work with me individually, maybe using some of these other modalities to learn. Chances are, if this is something you're interested in, we can make this happen pretty quickly. So if that's something you are interested in, hey, go to my website, see what you think about that. In the meantime, here is to you, bring more clarity about what is truly going on here, not just the why, but the how. More confidence in your ability to change, more creativity in the change process, more clarity, confidence, creativity to everything you do. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.